So now we're pretty close to having the full picture complete. We can upload videos from the client and get those videos entirely processed and then added back to cloud storage. We have our UI, which can invoke some functions, but we don't yet save any information about those videos within our database. Like, we should absolutely be storing some metadata about them. Like, for example, who is the user that uploaded them? What's the name of the video, like the video ID, maybe the date that the video was uploaded, the title, the description, all that information. Now, we're not going to go super in depth into all that functionality. Our goal here is to build out a skeleton where you can actually implement that stuff on your own. And by the time we're done, it should be pretty easy for you to do that. There's one other thing. There's actually a subtle bug with this implementation. PubSub will keep delivering a message every 600 seconds if Cloud Run does not respond with a 200 status code. If it doesn't respond with an acknowledgement, that's what an acknowledgement is, like basically a successful request was completed. So what happens if PubSub sends the same message multiple times? Well, we're going to process that video multiple times. We're going to write it to cloud storage multiple times. That's a problem. How can we fix it? Well, one solution, and we'll talk about others later on in the course, but one solution is to store the status of the video. So as soon as we get a video and we see that we're starting to process it, we'll change the status to processing. I messed up my E there. Basically, we'll have a status stored in Firestore. We'll sync the status. So next time PubSub delivers that same video, we'll check, hey, that video's already processing. We don't need to start processing it again. So even if multiple times we receive a request, there won't be any side effects. This is very, very important in designing a system. That's why I'm showing it to you. Most people don't talk about this stuff in courses. It's called idempotency. Once the video is completed processing, we can probably change the status to complete or completed processing, or just like processed for short. At that point, we'll know that this video is ready to be served in the UI. And also, once we're storing that information in Firestore from our Next.js app, we'll be able to use Cloud Functions to fetch that data. But that's going to be in the next video. But for now, we're going to focus on Cloud Run, synchronizing the status of videos and then saving them once they're complete. So jumping into the code, I probably don't have to tell you where we're going to be coding up this time. It's going to be in the video processing service, of course. And we're going to go into the source code, and we're actually going to first install a dependency. I'm going to install a dependency you might be familiar with. It's called Firebase admin. We're already using it in our Firebase functions. So once you do that, let's go ahead and create another file in our video processing source directory, and I'm going to call it Firestore. This is going to be for all interactions with Firestore, and I'm just going to copy and paste a bit of boilerplate. I'll kind of explain it to you. First, we're just importing Firestore and creating an instance of it. And we're calling initialize app like we did earlier in our Firebase functions. I'll actually show that to you over here. We're calling initialize app, but we're doing it slightly differently. We're passing in a credential, and the reason is we're telling our service, our code that's going to be running in Cloud Run, to use the default credential, which will give us access to the Firestore instance, because that's what this is about. And we don't have to specify which Firestore instance because there's only a single one allowed per GCP project. I'm not 100% sure why that is, but that's the case, so we don't have to specify which Firestore instance. Now, here's some code that you might want to use if you were trying to test this out locally. Instead of writing and reading from the production Firestore, if you wanted to read from a local one, but I'm not doing this because it's going to require some setup with the Firestore emulator, and also you're going to need to add this environment variable to your Cloud Run service. It's not added by default. You're going to have to do that. Next, I'm also going to paste a little bit. It's not super complicated. One, we have our video collection ID. We're going to be using it in multiple places, so I think it makes sense to have a variable for this. We could have even done so in our Cloud Functions where we used the user collection. We only used it once, but still, I think it's not bad to have a variable declared for it like we did with the raw videos bucket. Also, we're going to have a video interface. This is what we expect the documents in our Firestore to look like in our videos collection. And we're marking all of them as optional with the question mark, even though we would expect every video to at least have an ID. Every video, again, is going to have an ID. It's going to be tied to a user because there must have been a user who uploaded it. And it's also going to have a file name where this is the file name that's stored in the processed videos bucket so that we can fetch that video if we need to. Also, the status. Here I'm saying the status can't just be a string. It has to be one of these two strings, either processing or processed or undefined. If you hover it, that's exactly what it tells you. It can be one of these three. And every video might have a title, a description. We could also add a date, but I'm actually not going to be filling in these fields. I'm just kind of showing you how we could do this. I'm building out the skeleton for you. Next, I'm going to have three functions. Two of them are going to be exported, and I probably could add some JS doc comments to each of these. But we already did that a little bit earlier, I think in our storage files. So I don't really need to teach you how to do it. And I don't want to waste too much of your time. So here, get video is going to be pretty simple. Given a video ID, we want to fetch that video from Firestore. This is how you can do that. First of all, it's going to be asynchronous. So I'm going to put an await there so I don't forget. And we're going to specify which collection. Remember, if a collection doesn't exist, it's still okay. We'll just probably get returned nothing. We're going to pass in the video collection ID. Then we want to choose which document, and that video ID is going to tell us exactly that. So this is the collection ID, this is the video ID, and then you still have to call get, I believe, to get the document. And actually, this doesn't return the document. It returns a snapshot of the document. And if you want to get the actual document, you have to call snapshot.data on it, and then that's what we ultimately want to return. And if you look at the return value of this function, it's a promise of a document or undefined. Now, if this is undefined, we don't want to return undefined. We can just return an empty object. I think that's a better way to do it. And actually, in case that this is not undefined, let's add a type around it as well, like this, as video, so that interface that we defined up above. Now, scrolling down, we get to set video, which is going to be pretty similar, except we're writing to Firestore. So here we are going to return Firestore.collection with the same collection ID, video collection ID, and then .document with the video ID. And we want to set some data. So we're passed in the video ID, but also the video interface, the video object actually, that we want to add. So we'll pass that in as the parameter. And here there's a very important second parameter. It's the options for this. And I'm going to add the option merge true. What that means is if there's already a video stored in Firestore for that ID, and we're only specifying a couple things, like maybe we're only passing in the description and not defining any of these. With merge true, we will merge this data that we're passing in. It won't delete the original data that was already there. It'll just overwrite the one field that we specify. If we didn't have that, it would delete the original document and then only populate the data that we're specifying. And you'll see why that's important in a little bit, because when we set video, we're not necessarily going to be passing in every single video field. Here, we actually don't need to await on this because we can still await on the outer function like set video. The reason we called await over here is because we definitely don't want to return the data until this line has executed. And we can't call .data on the snapshot, which is a promise, until we've actually fetched it. Like if I do this, watch, we'll get an error. See? So that's why we need the await there. Lastly, is a video new? The only reason we're going to be fetching a video in this service is because we want to determine if a video is new or not. And we can do that pretty easily like this. Video equals await get video, passing in the video ID. And we're then just going to return is the video status equal, this is equal to undefined, then the video is new. That means the video object didn't exist. That means we returned an empty object here. Therefore, this is a new video. So that was the hard part. To be honest, we're pretty much done. All we now have to do is go back to our index file and just update this API route, which has gotten pretty long. I think it's like 40 lines of code. It'd probably be good to split it up and refactor it into multiple functions. And honestly, inside of an endpoint, you usually just want to have a single function call anyway. But I'll leave that as an exercise for you. I think refactoring will probably help you understand what this code is doing. And again, I don't want to waste your time too much. remember what we're trying to do here. We don't want to process the video unless it's a new video. So we can add some logic to do that. When we get the file name and stuff, before we actually download the video, we have to check, is this a new video? So we can call is video new, and we have to pass in the video ID. So what are we going to use as the video ID? Well, for us, I'm actually going to keep things very, very simple. And first of all, we know the input file is going to look like this, where the first thing is the user ID, the person who uploaded it, the date, and then the dot extension of the file. So what do we want to set as the video ID? Well, I'm just going to do this because we know it's pretty much going to be unique. So how do we get that? Well, we can just call input file dot split on the period character and then get the first part of that array. So we'll get this section and then we'll pass the video ID in here. And if this is not a new video, then we're going to return a status of 400. There might be a more precise error code we could return in this case, but I'm not going to focus on that here. We're going to return bad request video already processing, or processed maybe. Now, otherwise, we're going to continue with the rest of this function. But before we do that, we should probably say that we started processing the video, right? Like we should call set video and pass in the video ID and also pass in the video object. What should we pass in for the video object? Well, one, we want to set the video ID, which we already have now. We want to set the user ID. How do we get that? Well, we can take the video ID and probably split it based on the dash character and then get the first part of that, because if this is the video ID, the user ID is just there. And next we'll get the status, which we're going to set as processing. I'm a bit inconsistent with my single and double quotes, so you'll have to excuse me when it comes to that. But now we have our set video, and we should probably wait for this to complete before we continue. And after we've made sure we process the video, we can then probably update the status to being processed. So we can once again call set video, and for the same video ID, pass in a new video object. Well, in this case, all we really have to change is the status and say it's now been processed. And actually another thing, the file name, because now that it's been processed, we have the final file name, which is the output file name. And notice how I'm not specifying the ID or the user ID. This is why using merge true is important, so that we don't overwrite the previous information that we already wrote. So I'm going to put an await over here as well. Now we're pretty much done with the code. One thing I'll mention, there actually are some subtle bugs here, and I'm actually not going to explain them to you. I encourage you to try to figure them out, and if you can't, don't worry, we'll kind of go over them towards the end of the course, but try to think about the edge cases. There's a lot of different paths here. Are we handling all of them correctly now that we've introduced the database component here? Try to think about what the message queue would do if some of these edge cases were to be executed. And if you're a beginner, you might not be able to figure it out, and that's perfectly fine. But now we are ready to actually redeploy our service, and we're pretty much just going to be following the same steps as earlier. So I won't go over them super in depth, but one is going to be Docker build, and you're going to want to replace the project ID with your project ID, and that should be good. So I'll go ahead and run that. After that's done, you're also going to want to push the image now to the artifact registry. So I'll paste my project ID and go ahead and do that. And after that's done, the last thing you're going to want to do is redeploy the image. I'll give you the command to do that. And you can also do it through the UI if you'd rather, but I'm just going to do it here because it's easier to copy and paste. And just adding my project ID and then going ahead and running this. There's, I think, a visual bug here or something's going on, but I think the command is correct. And that was pretty quick. Now let's upload a video and see what happens to Firestore. First, I'm going to Firestore in Firebase. You could also check it out in the Google Cloud UI. And you can see there's only a single collection. Let's see if uploading a video will result in there being a videos collection. So let's try it out here. I'm going to pretty much upload the same video as before. So it looks like the video upload was successful. Now let's check out the bucket, and that should probably be successful as well because we didn't change any code there. And the one place you might want to check though is your logs of your video processing service, because in case something goes wrong, the logs will probably give you a hint as to what went wrong. But the ultimate test of truth is going to be in Firestore. It might take a second to update. I hope it does, or maybe we can refresh. And And yeah, refreshing looks like it worked, and it looks like, okay, we were too slow. The video's already done processing. I thought maybe we were going to be able to check while it was processing as well and see that dynamic update, but we uploaded a pretty short video, so it went pretty quick. Awesome, things are finally starting to come together. Now all we need is to be able to watch videos within our UI.